nearest and dearest ties represented among us are under the very shadow of death. That's the bad news. Some of you know that better than I can articulate. Life can feel like a continuing apprenticeship to sorrow, loss, death, hurt, pain, devastation. We've not become accustomed to it yet. You and I know something about the quiet persons of the Bible. Men like Joseph, the husband of Mary in the early gospel, who played a major role but didn't have a speaking part. Or women like Elizabeth, whose recorded words are few and she's carrying that bumbling baby boy prophet in her womb. But her impact is significant. And now, when we come to Genesis 22, 23, 24, we meet a boy and now a man named Isaac. Isaac is the kind of silent man of Genesis. We don't read much of his words, but his story is remarkable. He is the first person we see grieving the loss of a mother in the biblical record. He's not the first person to lose a mother, but in his loss, we get a window into the grace that God gives to cover our grief. I don't know where you are today. I don't know what you have lost or what you stand in need of. But I want to tell you that whatever crushing blow of loss you suffer, God's grace is deeper still. Let me see if I could say it this way. God is able to make you happy again. He's able to bring joy back to your heart. The sorrow and the crushing blow of death does not have to strip you of all of your joy. We see this young man who lost his mother. Now, it's a crushing blow to any son to watch his mother pass away. I wish I didn't know that in personal and intimate ways. I understand how that feels, that grief can be unbearable when you consider the memory of comfort, the provision and the security, all that was provided to you by a person, another human being who loved you simply because you were you. No strings attached, just a mother's love for her son. And here now, Isaac comes upon a difficult pass for which many of us may one day come. He loses his mother. What a mountain of grief Isaac must have felt. Watching his mother endure, hearing and thinking of her remarkable testimony that God in some wonderful, majestic way had fulfilled a long wish and promise, and that she trusted the Lord and carried him in her old age. That even on the latter end of her life, she stepped out on faith. And then having to watch that woman whose breasts he nursed, having to take her last breath. What a mountain. What a mountain of grief Isaac must have felt. We humans tend to forget that life is temporary. We are not here for long. We tend to easily feel like the terra firma on which we stand will last forever. But all of the ties we have, the nearest and dearest to us, are under the very shadow of death. That's complicated because we humans are not simple creatures. If we were one cell or one stem creatures, maybe it would be one thing to suffer a loss here or there, but we are love creatures. We weep and we laugh in every language and in all cultures of the world. Our hearts run deep with affection and emotion. We love and we love hard. And now here comes Isaac. In his young adult years, the Bible says that Sarah passed at 127 years old. Looking at the time at which she gave birth, Isaac is a young adult man, and here he stands grieving the loss of his mother. I think this record in the Bible is left for us, not simply to narrate the transition of God's big story, not simply to tell us what happened next and to view the line of succession, but also this biblical story is left on record to point to grace, the grace that God gives when we suffer grief. What happens after Sarah's passing? What is it that shifts the momentum in Isaac's life? Scholars tell us that it was some 3 years between the time of Sarah's passing and when Abraham sent his servant to find a wife for his son Isaac. Now, this is striking because Abraham is clear that he does not want his servant to choose a wife for his son from the land where they currently are. But he wants his servant to go to the land of his people to choose a wife there. And Abraham's servant takes this task seriously. When he gets to the place where he's looking, he's praying, Lord, let me run into the woman that you have chosen for my master's son. Now, this is a world away from our cultural norms where we pick and choose our own spouses, and that's all right. I don't think the Bible is telling you and I to let our parents pick our spouses. But within this cultural window, we are able to extract the living principle and apply it to our lives today. That if you have godly parents, if you've got godly mentors and leaders in your life, let them pray with you to choose your spouse to make one of the most momentous decisions that you will make in your life. Invite their wisdom in to search character and to view integrity for the person with whom you plan to spend the rest of your life. But notice also Rebekah's amazing showing of character, of grace, and of hospitality. She gladly, willingly, and immediately agrees to water the camels. I don't know if you've ever watered a camel, but it is a painstaking process to let a camel slake its thirst. And she waters not only one, but the Bible intimates a caravan of camels. And in this moment, Abraham's servant can see that this is a woman of charm, of service, and of hospitality. He goes in to ask her father and her brother Laban, can your daughter be taken as a spouse for my master's son? I know this is a world away from where we are, but I want you to sense what's happening in this text. Not only is Rebekah given permission, but she's asked if she's willing to go. And only when she agrees to go is she permitted to go off and to marry a man whom she's about to meet. And they bless her as she goes. They bless her in 2 ways. They say, you will be fruitful, and may your offspring capture the gates of their enemies. Well, this was more prophetic than even her brother Laban would have known. As we'll see in a little bit, it's actually her offspring, Jacob, who possesses the gates of his enemies, her brother Laban. This is one of those instances where the person receiving the blessing came out more powerful than the one giving the blessing. Rebekah leaves stronger than the clan she departs. She emerges victorious and more powerful, and in soon, short order, wealthier than the clan she left. Now she goes off. She goes off to meet the man she's about to marry. And when they get there, as she dismounts the camel, in an almost cinematic kind of moment, she spots Isaac at the same time Isaac spots her, and it's a kind of love at first sight. I want you to read the language of love that shows up in Genesis chapter 24. And Isaac brought her into the tent of his mother Sarah and took Rebekah to be his wife. Isaac loved her, and he was comforted after his mother's death. Oh, what a mountain of grief he had. But the Bible uses a word to characterize marriage in this instance that it does not in many instances, and in many instances in our world that does not characterize marriage. The Bible says Isaac loved her. This was a feeling, an affection, a commitment, a devotion that put her and elevated her on a level beyond where she was before. And maybe what might seem to some to be a strange twist of fate, but I think in the ironic and majestic providence of God in the scriptures, God uses this marriage to comfort this young man in his lowest point of grief. Because God will do that. God will give you new relationships that do not replace the old ones, but help you to hurdle the waves of grief. Not only that, God uses this marriage to elevate Rebecca above her status. Friends, I don't know what you're facing, what loss you may endure. I do know that the dearest ties represented among us are under the shadow of death. But I also know this: God is able. When you depend upon Him for His provision, God is able to give you grace in your grief. Now, I've stood at the grave of many a church member, even there with my own family. I've watched the solemn weight fall like the casket into the ground. I've seen families turn back from the funeral procession only to get in the car and go home without the one with whom they love, never to see the clothes move again in the closet or to hear that cheerful voice on the other side of the phone. I've seen that. And every time that I've watched that family move on to that procession, I think in my heart, what a taller, grander mountain of grace God has for our mountains of grief. You can trust God and experience His touch of grace on the portrait of your grief.